Hello and welcome to the show. I'm excited to be here with Georgette, which we are going to dive in all things how to help small businesses hire their first employee, but also understand the mindset, the processes, and of course, that you need to implement in order to have your dream employee because they do exist. And Georgette, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely. We're finally making it happen. We've been trying to connect for a while, and so it is finally here. But one of the things that we always like to start is tell us about you. Where are you from, and how you ended up having your own consulting firm?
So I'm from Palm Beach County, Florida, from Boca Raton. For those who are familiar, I'm now based in Boynton Beach, and I went to school. I'm a Florida girl through and through. My parents are Puerto Rican, and so I spent a lot of time visiting the island growing up. And I went and got a degree at Florida State University. My degree is in social science with an emphasis in public service. I thought upon graduation, I was going to go the nonprofit route, basically give my blood, sweat, and tears to a good cause and make some money along the way. And then I fell into HR after graduation. I ended up taking an internship and I absolutely loved the experience, fell in love with helping people within the corporate environment. I've always seen myself as somebody who just wants to help other people. And so maybe that's the community in me, right? The Latina in me jumping out. But I really enjoyed getting to know people so closely in the workplace. And I had what I considered to be a foundational experience as an intern hired to create an internship program for my employer at the time. That ended up being several years later the concept of my initial business was Intern Gal. Since then, I've continued to grow both professionally within the corporate workplace and also as a consultant. And so since then, now I have Algo Más HR, which is my HR consulting firm.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Now, are you now a full time consultant or are you still also working with corporate?
No, I'm still in corporate. So I work part time on the consulting. I refer to myself as a corporate HR girly with a business. And I actually think that's part of the reason why I'm so effective as a consultant is because I have the same day to day challenges that the small business owners or peers in HR are experiencing. And so I have just a slightly different perspective compared to just being full time. The goal is to go full time eventually, but right now, I am getting what I'm looking for from corporate and trying to maximize that opportunity in order to secure my family, for the future.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that. We're not judging here. I was just chismosa. I always like to
Yeah,
know
yeah.
like what are we doing. And the reason why I wanted to ask you is because I also
Mhm,
want to normalize that for some people that have businesses, it's not just about I hate my job and I'm gonna quit and bye bye corporate. Like there's some
mhm,
people that say, no, I actually have a good relationship with corporate and I want to
mhm,
continue to have it until it serves me. And after that, then I'll change my mind. But I wanted to ask you this because I see people saying, like, just quit your job and call it quits. And, so dramatic for people to just go like full time in their business, which I actually also don't recommend because
mhm.
I want all of us to be financially secure before we make the move. So, thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I want to have a conversation with you because, as an entrepreneur who now has a team, I think we need to have the conversation on how small businesses can start thinking big. And the reason why is because a lot of us really just love to hustle and put on a hat. I'm the CEO, I'm the accountant, I am the marketer, I'm also the employee. And so there's so many
Mhm,
hats that we wear. One of the things that I feel is missing is a conversation with someone like you who is an expert in all things hiring, onboarding employees. So how can an entrepreneur set themselves for success when they're looking? We're just going to talk about the process, right? The application process. So,
mhm.
how can they find their dream employee by making sure that the application process is essentially what's going to attract the right person?
Yeah, absolutely. I think First and foremost, it's taking a step back and really understanding what is the impact that this person is going to have on the business, right? Because when you might start with a job title in mind, like social media coordinator, but the work that they might be doing that you're measuring them to in terms of success or impact to the business might actually be following up with leads that come in through social media, right? Which is more of a business development, sort of sales, account management skill versus what we think of traditionally from social media is more content generation, creating images on Adobe or Photoshop. And so it's really understanding like what is the final product of this person's work that you want, and then you build the job description around that. So core duties and responsibilities, technology platforms that you want them to either have experience in or be open to learning is really important. And then you craft your questions around that. So making sure that every piece is connected to the work experience. Of course, we all want to work with people that we like, that we feel personally connected to, but those should never be like the leading indicators of the work unless the job requires it, right? You're not going to hire somebody who is not comfortable public speaking in a sales role, and making sure that those things align. So I'll stop there for a second.
Love that. And it actually made me think of two things. One, how companies develop these job descriptions for people to solve a problem. And as entrepreneurs, I think there's also a little bit of a mindset of, well, I'm not a big corporation yet, so I shouldn't have this like quote unquote tedious job description, because what if people don't want to work with me? And I feel like there's also a little bit of fear of rejection in entrepreneurship of, well, what if no one applies? And sometimes we ended up with the wrong team member, which has happened to me as well. But you also said something super important that I thought, this is like so good. You said hiring the right team member for the right reasons. What are your thoughts on people hiring spouses, la mamá, la tía, sometimes even the neighbor? What are your thoughts on that?
We need to be honest with ourselves as to whether or not they have the right skill set. A lot of times we hire family members or people that we're close to, right? Because referrals have a lot of power. Referrals mean, okay, chances are this person, if I'm recommending you, that means that I'm certifying that you can work well with this within this environment, you can work well with this leader. You either have the skills or the capacity to develop those skills. But when it comes to family, family brings a different layer of complexity to the business. And so it is even more important that you have a clear cut job description and measures for success, especially if you're going to go within your personal network. Because, yes, those individuals may be more flexible with you in terms of what they do or how they support, which is invaluable for us as, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, smaller teams. But if you're serious about setting your company up for success, right? Corporate is just size. Everybody's still making stuff up as they go along, right? It's the illusion of this because there's more structure in place. But hiring is also a very vulnerable process. There is a little bit of fear that goes into it. And so we might go with somebody we know personally over maybe somebody who's more qualified because we have that sense of comfort with them. But in my experience, it's also harder to have those conversations when it's not working with that individual. And then things get dragged on and there's more impact to the business. So I'm not against it. I am definitely a little bit hesitant though, depending on the individual and the relationship that you have with the individual.
Thank you for sharing that. And I do want to say that I made the mistake of hiring not just one, but a couple family members. And even when I had all the tasks and the application and the expectation outlined it, I realized that they were not the right fit for me when they were texting me like at 9 p.m. like, "Hey, do you want me to do this?" And I was like, "Hey, I'm not your family member right now. Like, I'm your employer. Look at the SOP and follow
Mhm,
that communication app that we use." And
mhm.
I think that's when I realized that, oh, I think I made a big mistake. And I did it out of love for my family member because they needed some money. And so now when they ask me like, hey, do you have anything I can help you with? I always say, I don't, but hey, here are some leads for you, because I know that they're good employees. They're just not the employee for me. So I appreciate you
Right.
sharing that. Now, I want to go backwards a little bit, because sometimes, as entrepreneurs, we believe that the first step to hiring a team member, or perhaps the first team member, is the application, the qualifications, the expectations. But what are some things that you will advise a small business owner to do even before they get to the application process? Are there any behind the scenes, maybe SOPs or best practices that they should implement?
SOPs and process documentation, I think, is where most people think of. Like before that, most people think, okay, process or SOPs, which I wholly agree with. You need to have those things or be able to have a clear understanding of what your processes are so that you can communicate them if they aren't already documented. I will actually challenge you to go back even further and say, am I the kind of person who can manage another individual?
I love that.
Right? Because I
That's
feel like
crazy.
we, not everybody's meant to be a leader, right? And there's a difference between a leader and a manager. But as a solopreneur or CEO of your organization, you kind of have to do both, because a leader is somebody who is empowering their team, getting them to think through how to solve their own problems, their own challenges, right? Like they are having a higher level conversation. And then a manager is somebody who is overseeing the work and gets the team to do what they need to do, right? So it's more like do this way or do this by this SOP, and less of the like growth and development that a leader would embody, right? And so as a team of one, or if you're making your first hire, or even if I think every time you go to hire somebody, I think it's important to do like a self inventory of, okay, what are my preferences? What do I need from somebody? I need somebody who is responsive, like really responsive to messages during business hours. I need somebody who works quickly. Maybe I need somebody who is better at presentations than I am from like a design perspective, because I'm
It's
trying
all
to
of the above.
complement, right? Like all of these things. And also, are you as an individual patient? Do you have the patience it's going to take to train somebody? Because if you're going to bring on your hire, especially if it's your first hire, plot twist, sorry to say this, chances are it might not be the right hire the first time around. Hiring is something that, we do all of our due diligence and put all these processes in place, but ultimately, you won't know if it's the right person until they're in seat doing the work. Where we hold ourselves hostage in a way is because we'll say, well, I invested all this time in this person. I need this to work, versus it's not working. Let me talk to this person and acknowledge. Let's both acknowledge that this isn't working and start over, and let me go ahead and get this new person. And so that's where it's like, it is vulnerable because, yeah, you might have made the right or the wrong choice at the time, but it's no longer working anymore. But we would rather avoid having that conversation than just be direct and save the time and suffering on both sides and to the business. So I know I went off on a little bit of a
No,
tangent
no,
there,
I'm
right?
like,
But
you're
like,
giving us so many good things, and I'm just watching, and I'm like, this is so good, right? Like I every time people come, I just drooling over the knowledge that all of our experts share. So I appreciate you sharing that, because yeah, you're right. Not everyone was meant to be a leader, and I also feel like not everyone wants to be a leader, and not everyone should be a leader, right? Like we need all type of personalities, and that's why businesses thrive. Because imagine if everyone was a leader, where would we be, right? So
yeah.
let's talk about, okay, so we actually have the application, we have the behind the scenes, we already know that we're leaders, we want to manage somebody, or invites, I don't like the word manage anymore, I'm like, oh, I just got goosebumps. So we want to work with a team member. And so what are some of the best onboarding practices that a small business should implement?
I'd say put intentionality behind it, right? So when you present the offer, sound excited on the phone, right? Like you're onboarding this person. This is meant to be a celebration for you and for them before they start on their first day. It could be a week before, depending on how much time you gave yourself between offer and start date, at the very least the Friday before. send them a message that says, hey, so and so, like you're going to log in or you're going to get this email of what to expect on your first day, and have a plan for their onboarding time. It doesn't have to be super detailed. It doesn't have to be more than one page if that's what you can't give that, right? But like let's put a little more thought and intention behind our hires, because that is multiplied in the time, in shortening the time it takes to get them up to speed. If they're excited, if they understand their expectations, if they understand where their resources are, where they can go find the answer to the question themselves versus having to stop and ask you every 5 minutes, then those are like key pieces that will allow them to be successful even faster.
I love that. Now, it's 2025 by the time we're recording this podcast, and there's a lot of opportunities that are virtual, a lot of opportunities that are also not necessarily through direct hiring, but also as a contractor. What are the benefits of having a virtual assistant? And also, what are the benefits of maybe working with contractors?
Contractors are great when you have a specific need that you're trying to fill, that they are a subject matter expert, right? You hire a contractor because you know that they can do the job and do it quickly, ideally. And typically they are people who, not just experts, right? But they understand their craft. And so they can come in and tell you, hey, your marketing strategy is lacking XYZ. You know, your HR strategy doesn't have XYZ thing. Let's build this, or I'm going to build this for you, or however, whatever the relationship is there, right? But that is a quick acceleration for specific areas of business. And there's usually an end date tied to a contractor, right? Like once they fill the work, then they're done. So it's a temporary expense. Um, Depending on the nature of your business, some people will employ contractors to fulfill sort of longer term projects or goals. And that is okay. That is good. I'm not here to judge anybody on VAs versus contractors versus employees. What I will share is that there is no such thing as a contract employee, right? You're either you have an employment relationship with them or you don't. And so that's something I want to caution, is for people to have an understanding of, am I hiring a contractor or am I hiring an employee? Because the IRS recently put out new guidelines for that. And so typically with a contractor, or an employee, you are controlling their schedule, the tools that they use, the time in which they have to do the work, right? If it's on site, you're also controlling the location. Whereas contractors typically have a lot more autonomy around how they do their work, control over what work they prioritize, of course, in collaboration with the company. And their income is not solely determined on this one client. It's determined on their ability to impact multiple organizations. So there are some clear lines of sight that I want to explore for business owners. And then to your point about virtual assistants, help is invaluable, right? I think when you're running a smaller team, or maybe you're transitioning, considering from growing from one to hiring your first team member, contractor, or otherwise, there is a hesitation because it's every dollar counts, right? Every dollar makes an impact. But if you spend $5 here to get 15 over there, then that is worth the investment. So m- my advice would be, entrepreneurs, make sure that you're very clear as to your budget and your operating expenses, so that when you do the math, you can tell if the math is or isn't mathing on a particular hire, because VAs have such a broad scope and such a broad pay range now between skill sets. You could get somebody who's highly specialized in one area. You could get somebody who's more of an entry level, like generalist within the space. You could have somebody do only personal assisting, right? Or somebody who kind of functions not as a chief of staff, because really at that point you should hire a chief of staff, but they've got the tenure and experience to be able to make an impact in not just tactical ways, but also very strategic opportunities within the business too.
I love this conversation. I'm like, somebody go get me the palomitas right now because I'm like, wow, this is so good. Now I have so many things came to mind as you were talking about these. First of all, on this show and the mission of Say Hola Wealth is to help bridge the wealth gap, but also the wage gap. So we're bridging two gaps. And how can we, and I'm including myself in this conversation, how can we as small business owners ensure that our team members are compensated correctly, right? Other than we do the research and we kind of think, but like how can we be certain that we're not underpaying our own people?
Yeah. I mean, you said research. I'm going to reiterate research. I think research is the key here. And it's also talking to other business owners and understanding how much they are paying, right? Like where the reason these gaps exist is because we are uncomfortable as a society in acknowledging that money is important and that it drives our way of life. And so, because of that, there's like this fear around money where we're not supposed to talk to each other about it. And so, then you have employees who aren't talking to each other and sharing that, hey, this person makes this person makes this much, but person B actually has more experience in the field than person A. So, one way, I'll make it more specific, right? Like, one way in which business owners can make sure that their people are all sort of within the range is having a dedicated range. When you make your first offer and you are looking at what does it look like, right? Maybe your research says it could be $20 to $40 an hour for a particular service provider, depending on their experience. And that's kind of where the cap is. And you found somebody who's got some experience, but not too much. So maybe you bring them in at 25. And then you bring somebody in later on who's a better negotiator and similar qualifications, but they're more proactive about negotiating, and you bring them in at 30. Then you should have a conversation of, can your bottom line handle bringing this other person from 25 to 30 now, or when should we bring this person up? Because that is something that continues to happen. That's why job hopping is so prevalent and um, popular, because it is the shortest way to increase your individual wage over time faster, because companies will pay more to new talent, historically speaking, than to the talent that has stayed with them and given that tenure. And so I would also look at, what does your increase process look like? Maybe you don't have one, maybe you do it on an annual, but annually reviewing your team and how much they're paid, and if there's room in the market, the budget and the market, to increase that. I think those are two opportunities in which we can continuously work at chipping against the gaps that we
I
see.
love that you're talking about having a designated budget to hire team members because I feel that I see a lot of people, especially on Instagram, just hiring and glamorizing what it's like to be a CEO. And then, 3 months, 4 months in, then they're like, oh, my company isn't making money and I had to let go of my team. So, how do you know when you're actually getting, yeah, ready to invest in your team? Or also, like, should a small business actually invest in HR strategy before the employee, or how can we balance those two?
Here's what I'll say to the second piece. HR functions and responsibilities exist whether or not an HR person is part of your team or not. Right? You still have to create job descriptions, create a posting, you have to onboard them. You still have to fill out the correct paperwork with your state in order to have a new hire and file for unemployment and all of those things. So, yes, it behooves you to involve somebody. Now, there's what I call like a fractional movement now within the HR space in particular, where you can get access to consultants, executives at a fraction of an annual salary, just have them on retainer. And that way they'll give you the strategic advising, but it's not a huge impact to your budget the way a full time employee would. So that's where I'll say one. The other, I lost the question. It was a two-part question. Can you
Yeah,
repeat it
I
one more
was
time?
asking you like when do we hire them, right? Do we hire HR first or how do we know when small businesses because we have a lot of listeners that are small businesses, some people watch us on YouTube as well. And so how do we know when we're ready to say, okay, I have the budget to hire my first employee?
Usually, we don't see budget first when in terms of hiring, right? We see the need first, where either you are spending your time um, in tasks that you no longer want to be doing and you're drowning in as a solopreneur, um, or your capacity to handle client or product work, your capacity to make money has hit a cap because you are stuck with just having one person. And so that's usually when people will say, it's time for me to hire. And so at that point, then you would do the due diligence of, okay, what does the market say? What are all the steps that I need to do at the state level? And so I would just say, if you're cost concerned, follow HR people online. There are so many people who are sharing really great information right now that is accessible, that is summarizing all of the state resources, because it is our job to do the research and make a recommendation for our clients or for the corporate organizations that we work with. It is impossible to know every single thing. But if you're concerned and you want to have that like professional opinion ahead of time, then book an ask me anything session, right? Connect with somebody and have a discovery call, whether that's me or any other HR professional out there, because there are so many professionals who believe in the success and the impact of small business owners. It's just those limiting beliefs of I have to have, certain things in place. I'm not big enough to need HR support yet, but then maybe you don't hire us until 20 employees or 50 employees, which is 50 is like the magic number at a federal level that you are subject to all different kinds of laws. And so that's kind of late in the game. So I would recommend earlier than 50, right? Like maybe when you hit your 15 um, from a full time employee perspective, but there are other cost effective options to do that even sooner in this climate.
And I love that you're inviting the listeners and the viewers to connect with you, because I think that's also the key concept of becoming the or embodying the CEO identity, other than, oh, I just work for my business. Like being proactive is a way for people to say, well, I don't have 5 employees or 15 employees yet, but eventually this is my vision and how can we make it happen? And HR is actually one of what I call also like the board of directors for the business.
Mhm.
Need to come up with a new name because that one is for my upcoming book, for my Cash Libre book. But for business owners, is the same way. Like we don't just need to have a business coach. And even if your business coach says, well, you don't need anybody else, just follow my process. Like
Mhm.
I will caution the small businesses to be very careful with that, because you don't know that your business coach is following step by step the laws and regulations that are exclusive to your state. And this is why I wanted to bring you to have this conversation with you, because you are an expert in HR, and also you work with multiple industries and with multiple clients, so you get to see different concepts, different ideas. But I want to ask you a couple more questions. So let me look at my questions because I came so prepared for you. I want to ask you about AI, because as a small businesses, or as a small business myself, I should say, we are also leveraging technology to come up with so many things, right? From SOPs to
Mhm.
maybe even creating a dream job description. How are you leveraging AI in your small business?
Very intentionally, I will say, right? Like, not be afraid of AI. The future is going to belong to whoever figures out how to wield it most effectively as a tool for us. So I use it to help me draft proposals. I use it to draft onboarding communication. And so here's what I mean by that, right? Like, I'm not just hitting copy paste on exactly what it put out, but I'm putting in my notes, my recommendations, my thoughts, and I'm saying, hey, consolidate this to fit a specific format that I'm trying to use that would take me hours and hours and hours to actually get it to look that way. Um, and then same thing from a content generation perspective. Like if I'm trying to figure out, okay, I want to talk about this thing, but I need some ideas, give me 10 ideas. And then from there, I might still not like any of the 10, but I might know more about, okay, well, I will actually like this, but I want to say it in a more specific way. I would say it's very intentional right now. It's like my mini assistant.
I
in
love it.
terms of
Yeah, because you're a mom
speeding
and
up.
you're
Yeah.
busy, so it really saves us time. And it's not always about the bottom line, but it's really about making sure that as entrepreneurs, we are staying ahead of the game because, as you mentioned, it's not going anywhere. And so I appreciate you being like, yes, I'm using it because I want to normalize that. Just how I'm teaching Latinas how to invest in the stock market, I want us to normalize also the use of AI, obviously responsibly and intentionally. But I want us to have the conversation because I feel that a lot of small business owners are just behind because they're like, no, it's not going to sound like me. It's not going to do what I want. And so they really don't understand really the potential that it has. So I appreciate that. Now, I I want you to tell us like what is your definition of wealth?
I feel like that is a loaded question in a good way though, right? Because it's expansive. And I think to me my definition of wealth is from a monetary perspective being able to have the community impact that I would like to drive, my family being taken care of, right? Like I alluded before to being in corporate for a purpose, like everybody else in this game right now. And so to me, wealth is having the means and the resources to live my life the way in which I want to and help, drive positive change in the ways I hope to do. And I don't know what that looks like yet. I have some ideas, but I'd say that's to me what wealth looks like. It's not a specific measure that I'm targeting. It's bigger than that.
And I love that. I'm like, I love that for you because yes, yes, amen to that. Now, where can people find you? And go ahead and talk about your offers. How can people work with you?
Yeah, so you will find me mostly on Instagram at Algo Más HR. So that's ALGOMASHR. And for those who don't know, Algo Más stands for something more, which is what I'm hoping to bring to the world of work with this name and this identity. And in terms of my offers, there's three ways that people can connect with me. One is through my Ask Me Anything service, which is an advising capacity as a paid 1 hour consultation where you can come to me with any HR challenge or business challenge as well, because I have a couple of business advising through there. And we just talk about what it is that you're experiencing. You get a summary of the conversation and also some recommended actions that you can take. If you want some more intentional support, I have HR consulting either on a project or retainer basis, depending on the need. So, like we talked about recruiting and onboarding. Onboarding is my favorite thing, but performance management, there's many levels to the need. It just depends on the client. And then the third thing is speaking. So I'm able to provide workshops to help train business leaders, whether you're a first time hire, first time manager. Maybe you have a team of managers that you're looking to kind of upskill a little bit from that HR perspective. Those are some ways to connect with me.
And I love that. I'm like, yes, we also need HR speakers. This conversation has been um, so beautiful, Georgette. Like, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with any HR people that were so just like, I'm just drooling. I need more palomitas. So thank you so much for making the time to come to the podcast. And for the listeners, make sure that you give her a follow, check out the show notes, and I will see you all next week. Thank you.